They used to call it the tiny pharmacy, like it was a polite curse. My mother, Evelyn Bellamy, would smirk and say it with the exact same tone she used when she told me I was wasting my Harvard MBA. My father, Robert, would pat the paper bag of their cookies and tell me, gently but loudly enough for the cashier to hear, that I should sell and go work for a real company. Fink's Pharmaceuticals, the family favorite, was always the example. Big building, nice coffee, respectable name on the resume. Leave James, they hinted, the implication curling like smoke around the punchline. James. When I introduce him to people who know my parents, they do the thing parents do with their mouths. Half pity, half contempt. Oh, the yuppie, they say. James sits there as if he hasn't heard it 1,000 times. He's a man who measures things in patents and late-night schematics and the soft, furious math of trying to save people's lives on a shoestring. To my parents, those patents were worthless, a nice adjective for romantic folly. To me, they were the spine. The storefront on Chestnut is only 900 square feet of vinyl tile, fluorescent lights, and a floral wallpaper I never had the heart to replace because Grams loved it. We kept the registers small, the hours honest, so the neighbors would nod and the local doctor would keep dropping off prescriptions without asking too many big questions. The glass door says Bellamy Pharmacy in simple letters. The pamphlet rack has a brochure for home blood pressure checks and a community vaccination schedule. It's what I tell my parents when they come into the shop with their tidy, disbelieving smiles. It's community work, Mom. People need a pharmacist they know. What they don't see are the freight invoices folded into the morning paper. The nights I spent on conference calls so late, the city lights blurred into one steady apology. They don't see the servers humming in a space I rent under a different name, or the negotiated contracts with clinics across 3 counties. They don't see James in his garage lab at 2 a.m., glowing like a comet over Petri dishes and schematics, turning what they called worthless into chemical maps that would make oncologists lean in. It's not vanity that made me hang on to the storefront. It was strategy. Humble optics are a kind of camouflage. People trust what looks familiar. Pharmacies with shiny glass towers are watched, audited, bought. Small shops are invisible, incidental, until they aren't. That's the trick my parents never recognized. Pretending to be small buys you the space to be enormous without anyone thinking to check. Life with them in my living room, hands folded, thinly polite, is a different kind of pressure. Evelyn measures success in titles and banquets. Robert measures it in stability and the binary logic of climbing a ladder. They see a daughter who made choices that, on paper, look like slow-motion ruin. They don't know the engineers we hired under contract, the clinical trials James argued into existence, the doctors who call me by my first name when they order a batch of drugs that should, by any old accounting, cost 3 times what we charge. What's at stake is bigger than my ego. It's a ledger of actual people. Young mothers who smoked because the chemo that stabilized their kids' disease used to be priced out of reach. Rural hospitals that switched suppliers because we made a generic at a fraction of the cost. A clinic 2 counties over that can now afford to keep its doors open. If I fold and sell to a corporation that prioritizes shareholder smile lines over patient survival, those small wins evaporate. And if I lose James because my parents can't see past their idea of him, I lose the architect of the work itself. So I learned to sit through Sunday brunch and network with a smile while my mind ran scenarios like a private defense attorney. I nodded as Evelyn suggested contacts at Fink's, as if I treasured her advice, as if I were a woman one step away from redeeming some mysterious failure. Every suggestion to come work for someone better was a coin I put into a jar labeled proof of concept that only I could see. They think they're arguing with a struggling pharmacist who needs rescuing. They have no idea they're arguing with the person who built the scaffolding underneath the rescue. They have no idea about James's work, and they have no idea about the quiet network that turned our tiny glass door into a lifeline for hundreds. They have no idea the playbook we've been following like clockwork in plain sight. They called it tiny. I called it patience. And I had, for a while, convinced myself patience was enough, until the phone on the kitchen counter buzzed with a morning headline I couldn't ignore. The headline blinked on my phone like a dare. Harrison Holdings completes acquisition of Finks Pharmaceuticals. I watched the words twice, then a third time, feeling the room tilt like a ship that's finally found its wind. Across the table, Evelyn was mid-sip of her tea, eyebrows doing that slow climb people use when they're measuring someone for an apology. Robert was already reaching for his glasses, the universal sign he was about to interpret reality. Big merger, I said, casual as folding laundry. Interesting time. Evelyn laughed, the sort of small laugh that thinks it can keep the temperature down. Well, that's consolidation for you. Very corporate. You should have moved there ages ago, Jordan. Imagine the benefits. I set the phone on the table, screen up, headline visible. Their smiles stuck the way pictures do when you forget to blink. Jordan, my father said, what is that company? Harrison Holdings? Sounds new. New to the table. Ew, I said. Not new to us. Silence is a petulant animal in my parents' living room. They pried at it, like they always did, politely, with the confidence of people who have never had to explain a ledger to anyone but a tax agent. So? Evelyn asked. Are you going to apply? You could be. No, I said. My voice was the quiet you use when you've decided you're no longer bargaining. I'm not applying. I'm being appointed. Robert's fork clattered. He was a man whose life had been built on the predictable physics of employment: degrees, promotions, corner offices. He blinked like somebody trying to bring a photograph into focus. Appointed where? At Finks, I said. I'm being named CEO of Finks Pharmaceuticals under Harrison Holdings. They both went through the exact same 4 stages: disbelief, denial, a rapid 1-2, irritation, and finally a kind of stunned, incredulous silence that smelled a little like fear. Fear of being wrong. Evelyn's hand trembled on her teacup. Robert's mouth pursed into a question mark. You're joking, Evelyn said. This is some kind of joke. If I wanted to be funny, I'd have bought you a pony, I said. I'm not joking. The thing about people who have always sized you up is they don't know how to handle the moment the arithmetic changes. They had always reduced our life, James and mine, to neat, contemptuous fractions. A little shop, a quixotic husband, a wasted MBA. None of their assumptions included leverage or patents or shadow deals that look like nothing until they become everything. So how? Robert asked. How did this happen? I don't understand. Who is Harrison? Where did they even come from? Harrison is an investment and management firm, I said. They buy companies, stabilize them, and when necessary, restructure them around a mission. Finks had the brand and distribution. They needed supply, and they needed someone who knew how to make supply ethical, scalable, and resilient. That someone is me. Evelyn's nostrils flared. But your tiny pharmacy. How? I echoed. The word is a knife with 1,000 edges when your parents say it with pity. You called it tiny. I called it the front office. I kept the store because it offered cover, credibility, a low-profile point of contact with doctors and clinics. It let me test pricing models and logistics without alarming anyone who would have put a stop to it. The real work, research procurement, cold chain distribution, contract manufacturing, ran under different names. James pushed his chair back from across the room. For the first time, my parents saw the lab coat in his eyes. You always thought his work was romantic, I said to Evelyn, but it's not art house romance. It's crystallography and cross-linking and patent families. James' patents weren't whims. They were scaffolding. She looked at him then, properly. The way she looked at people when she finally understood there was an entire universe in their pockets. James, she said, like the word was a new shape she had to fit her mouth to. James stood, quiet and slightly awkward, his default dignity. The compounds I worked on were early stage, he said. We optimized synthesis paths to bring production costs down without losing efficacy. That's not glamour. It's math and a lot of failed nights and arguing with vendors. But it works. We turned complex molecules into manufacturable processes. That's the difference between a promising paper and an actual drug that people can afford. Robert's face softened in that odd, reflexive arithmetic way. Pride plus recalibration equals something like respect. So your husband, what did he patent exactly? Multiple things, I said. a delivery mechanism for a class of nucleotide therapies, a stabilization process for biologics that reduces waste in production, and a generic pathway for an oncology compound that used to be prohibitively expensive. We licensed some of those to small manufacturers and used revenue to fund trials. Harrison saw the value chain, IP, manufacturing know-how, distribution, and bought the infrastructure. They also bought the goodwill we'd accumulated in clinics. Then they asked who could actually run this from the inside without wrecking it. I let the sentence hang. They had always assumed I wanted a corner office with a Bravo plaque. They didn't see my strategy: to keep the patient at the center, not the dividend. They didn't see the nights James and I spent drafting contracts that explicitly forbade price gouging. They didn't know about the clause we inserted in an early license agreement that required a minimum supply at cost plus in regional hospitals. They thought our ethics were sentimental. To me, they were structural. Evelyn's hands were clenched in her lap. But why? Why would Harrison, who are they, hand you this? Why you, Jordan? Because Harrison wanted someone who could deliver at scale and not be tempted by short-term profit. Because I'd built the systems that made transition possible. Because James's patents were the backbone of the price reductions we promised clinicians. Because I understand the logistics, the compliance, and the way to keep hospitals stocked without letting private capital eat the patients. My parents were silent in a way that meant their internal narrative of me was collapsing. The daughter who needed rescuing was no longer a convincing story. The quiet thing was, I didn't want them to be rescued. I wanted them to watch a truth they'd bullied into being for years finally pull itself above the surface and breathe. We'll be running Finks as a division under Harrison, I continued. They've appointed me to lead the integration. That means I'll be the one signing off on production runs, pricing strategies, and distribution. It means James will have a seat at the table for R&D. It means the medicines we've been working on, the ones that would have been priced out of reach, will get to clinics with margins that don't bankrupt families. Evelyn's mouth made a small, startled O. So the things you were doing were real. They were real, James said. They were incremental and boring and bureaucratic and the best kind of stubborn. Robert put his hand over his heart the way men who've lived by order do when they see a new kind of order they didn't help design. And the pharmacy? He asked. You kept the store? Was that part of this? It was part of it, I said. And it was symbolic. People trust a storefront. They walk in, they get advice, and they leave knowing someone saw them. That trust scaled into partnerships. A lot of the clinical rollouts started because a nurse trusted us enough to call. You mocked the storefront, but it seeded the network that made Harrison confident enough to trust me with Finks. I watched their faces like pages in a book. Evelyn had always been a woman allergic to nuance. Now her features read like the first draft of somebody trying to relearn a language. Robert, who had always mapped the world in risk and reward, looked for the risk still. Is this safe? He asked. With medicines? With regulations? It's safer than leaving drug pricing to the market's appetite for greed, I said. We have to navigate regulators, yes. We built that team too. We proved viability with generics and compassionate use programs. Harrison didn't buy us for a headline. They bought us to keep those programs going at scale. They were both quiet for a long time. The house was suddenly full of the sound of the world rearranging the furniture of our family history. The small shop that had been a shame to my parents was now the secret engine of an empire. The worthless patents were the engine. The daughter they'd told to get serious had been the quiet architect. Finally, Evelyn set down her teacup with a noise like a verdict. So what do you want from us? She asked. Her voice carried the old imperative, an expectation that the daughter would now accept praise and return to the place of the grateful child. I could have asked for money, for an apology, for a parade. What I wanted was simpler and harder. Acknowledgement that their map of me had been incomplete, and that the life I'd built with James wasn't a mistake to be corrected, but a thing that had saved lives. I want you to understand, I said. When you think I was wasting my degree, someone was being saved. When you think James was tinkering, he was building a viable production route that lowers costs for patients. I want you to see that the tiny things you mocked were deliberate. I don't want your pity. I want your curiosity, maybe your respect, and a little humility." They looked at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw the actual unfiltered shock of parents realizing their child had been quietly, radically competent. Evelyn's eyes watered. Not the theatrical water that comes from being told to be proud, but real, complicated moisture that carried regret and something like wonder. "You're telling us you built all this," Robert said softly. "And you kept it from us." "I kept it from you," I said, "because it was easier to move when people assumed I was small, because I wanted to protect what we were building from people who only saw spreadsheets." The room settled into a fragile truce, the kind that forms when a new fact has been added to a shared history, and everyone has to find their place around the new table. I could have left it there, let the revelation hover. But I hadn't spent years turning tiny into leverage to be coy. I had a plan, one that included giving them a proper look at the thing they'd been asked to mock. "Come with me," I told them. "Not now, soon. I want you to see the factory, meet the team, see the numbers for yourself. That's the only way you'll understand." Evelyn's laugh this time was small and disbelieving in a different way. Less a shield, more a crack in the armor. "We'll see," she said. We all knew she meant it would take more than a tour. But the seed was planted in their mouths, an invitation they couldn't easily pretend was nothing. I watched them leave my house that afternoon and thought, as the door clicked closed, that the hardest part of revenge isn't the spectacle, it's teaching people to correct their mistakes without being petty about the lesson. I smiled then. Not mean, not celebratory, but satisfied in a way that felt like justice disguised as inevitability. The headline was still on my phone. Harrison Holdings had bought Finks. My name was on the paperwork. The people my parents thought I was wasting my degree on were finally going to get the medicine they needed. And James was right there by my side, sleeves rolled up and already planning our next move. They accepted the invitation with the same brittle politeness they used for brunches. "We'll come see," Evelyn said. But the look on their faces when the Blacktown car pulled up to the plaza said everything their words didn't. The building was a slice of a city I had kept from them for years. Glass like polished thought, an atrium tall enough to swallow the memory of Chestnut Street, sunlight folding down into a lobby where people in lab coats and business suits passed like planets in orbit. "Jordan, this is," Robert began, and then stopped because the language he had used to describe success didn't fit here. The security guards scanned their IDs with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen 1,000 visitors and 1,000 secrets. We rode the elevator up past signs that read pharmaceutical operations, quality, distribution, names the storefront could never host, but that had always been the work's true home. The first thing Evelyn said loud enough for the woman at reception to hear was, "It's very modern." She meant it as a tidy dismissal, like a compliment you hand someone you can't quite forgive. I led them through a glass corridor into a production hall that smelled faintly of solvents and disinfectant and something else, cleanliness that had been earned. Rows of stainless steel reactors looked like cathedral organs, their dials blinking. Robotic arms moved with a soft, inexorable choreography, filling vials, sealing them, labeling them with calm precision. In the center of the floor, a board displayed live metrics. Units produced today, units shipped, supply chain health, patient orders fulfilled. The numbers moved like a heartbeat. "This is where you make the drugs," Evelyn said, as if the room might explain centuries of underestimation. "This is where we make them affordable," I said. I asked one of our production leads, Maya Patel, who'd started in the quality lab and now ran scale-up, to show them the difference a production route makes. Maya walked them to a display case and took out 2 small, identical glass vials. One had a label with an old logo from a company many hospitals recognized. The other bore our name. "Same active," she said. "Different process." She tapped the old label. The old process had yield losses and expensive solvents. It was priced for a market that could absorb margins. Our route reduces waste and shortens synthesis steps. That cuts cost, not as a shortcut, as optimization. I let the numbers do the rest. Finks used to charge roughly. I paused because exact figures felt like gloating, but honesty was part of the lesson. Tens of thousands per typical course of treatment for this particular oncology drug. We produce it at a fraction of that cost. We've negotiated contracts to deliver it to regional hospitals and clinics at cost plus, and we set aside manufacturing capacity for public health programs. The board behind Maya flickered to a map showing hospitals receiving shipments that afternoon. Evelyn's breath hitched. Robert's jaw loosened like a hinge that had been welded shut for years. They had sat through dinner table lectures about making something of yourself, but no one had told them what making something could actually mean. They had not imagined choices that saved people instead of merely elevating a resume. We walked through the distribution center where conveyor belts fed trucks labeled with county health department stickers. A nurse I'd worked with for 5 years, Monica Reyes, stepped forward. She didn't wear a name badge for show. Her hands bore the calluses of bedside care. "We used to ration doses," she said, looking at my parents like someone giving testimony. "We had to pick who got a full round and who got a stopgap. This year, we haven't had to do that. That's because your daughter made sure supply was reliable and affordable." Evelyn's face crumpled in a way that wasn't theatrical. It was the honest collapsing of someone realizing their moral ledger had been off. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, and there was no accusation in it, only bafflement. "Because you would have tried to buy us," I said. "Because when the world thinks you're small, it lets you be nimble. I needed to run without the assumption that I would sell myself out to the highest bidder." I didn't say the next part the way Evelyn wanted to hear it, an apology followed by reparations. I said it because it was true for me. I wanted to build something that couldn't be easily auctioned away. We stopped at a glass-walled meeting room that overlooked a bank of incubators. On the table sat a prototype shipment of the oncology drug, carefully packaged, labeled with lot numbers, destined for a hospital whose oncologist had cried on the phone the first time we promised steady supply. I watched my parents watch tiny boxes that contained other people's chances. Robert folded and unfolded his hands like someone preparing to pray and forgot the words. "So you, James." This is all because of his work. James, who had followed us through the facility like a man still surprised by his own competence, leaned against the glass. "We did the math," he said. "We optimized. We endured regulatory pain. We lost sleep. And we put clauses in contracts so that if someone bought us, the terms for affordable supply would remain. And if that's structural protection, that's the point." "That sounds like love," Evelyn said, and it surprised her as much as it did me. Love for patience, for precision, for the stubborn belief that medicine should be a means of saving people rather than padding balance sheets. We toured the community outreach wing next. Walls were pinstriped with thank you notes, handwritten cards taped beneath photos of recovery. A bulletin board listed clinics we subsidized and programs we funded. A volunteer coordinator, a woman named Keisha, explained a school outreach program that provided pediatric meds to rural districts. The scale of it was not a headline stunt. It was a logistical argument for dignity. By the time we reached the rooftop garden, a small, improbable oasis meant to remind people that biochemical progress is still human, Evelyn's eyes had the shine of someone sifting through regret and finding seeds of pride. She touched a leaf like one might check a child's fever. "I mocked you," she said quietly. "I told people you were wasting yourself." "You did," I said, "and now you see why I didn't listen." Robert was looking out over the city, not at it. "You built a company that prioritizes patients," he said, "not profits. That's not how I thought the world worked." "It's how it should," I said, "and it's possible if you design the incentives right." My voice was calm because the job of revenge, if that's what this was, didn't need to be loud. I'd never wanted to humiliate them. I wanted them to correct the map they'd used to navigate my life. Evelyn reached for my hand. It was a small gesture, tentative and private. "I was afraid you were being small," she said. "I see now what you were doing." "You were afraid I was failing," I said. "I get that, but failure and risk look different when you're the one doing the saving." She looked at James, really looked, and the weight of every snide remark she'd made about him melted into something else. "I'm sorry," she said. It was not the grand theatrical apology of a socialite trying to be redeemed. It was a human admission that the map had been wrong. Robert swallowed whatever he'd rehearsed about pride and said, "I don't know much about pharmaceuticals, Jordan, but I know this. People trust you." We were wrong to mock that. The moral resolution, if it wanted a name, was not a shouted justice or a ledger balance set to 0. It was small and domestic. An apology, a hand squeeze, a pair of parents learning to accept a child who'd chosen a different kind of ladder. That's the sort of payoff I'd been aiming for all along. Not spectacle. A correction. We left the rooftop and watched a line of trucks roll out of the loading bay, taillights blinking like a slow, purposeful constellations heading into the night. James put his hand on my back. "You wanted them to see," he said, not needing the rest of the sentence to be finished. "I wanted them to know," I corrected. "Not just to see, to know why I hid what we were doing." They knew now. Evelyn's voice was small when she spoke at last. "I'm proud of you." She sounded older and softer, as if the confession had reshaped her. "Thanks," I said. "That's enough." We drove back to Chestnut that evening, the tiny storefront a humble glow in the rearview mirror, and it felt like a settlement had been signed between the past and the future. The revenge, if anyone wanted to call it that, wasn't in humiliating them or in a dramatic public reveal. It was in the quiet demonstration that their assumptions had consequences for other people, and that I had spent years reversing those consequences. James and I sat on the back step of our shop long after the customers left, watching the streetlights tilt the world into long bands of trust. He handed me a mug of coffee the way he always did, like we'd never changed. "You did good," he said. "We did good." I corrected him, because credit is a communal thing when it comes to ethics and chemistry. We watched a truck's taillights disappear into the highway and felt the truth of something I'd once told my parents. Smallness can be a strategy, not a verdict. When Evelyn and Robert finally called, just a short, carefully phrased phone call later that week, Evelyn said, "We want to help. We don't know how, but we want to. We want to be part of this now." That's all anyone ever asks for, I said. Bring curiosity, bring questions. Leave the pity at home. She laughed then, a real laugh, without the tinny edge of superiority. "We'll try," she said. I hung up and looked at James. The city hummed somewhere out past the store. The glow from the tower we'd shown them caught on the glass of a distant window and turned the night into a promise. It wasn't revenge wrapped in fireworks. It was a life so deliberate and useful that it rewrote how my parents measured me. That, in the end, felt like the cleanest kind of justice. Not spectacle, but a life that made people better by default.